Alright, so in the last video we saw the basic units that make up an Active Directory, forests, domains, the ADDS, DC, etc. etc. So we took a brief overview of all the terminologies that will be used in an Active Directory environment. Alright, so in this video we will be setting up our domain controller, and in the next video we will be setting up our user computers using a virtual machine, and we will domain join them. So if you haven't understood any of this yet, don't worry, we should be taking a quick look at the lab sessions. So let's go and fire up our Google search engine and search for Microsoft Evaluation Center. Click on the first link. We will scroll down and click on Windows Server. We want to install Windows Server 2019, so click on that. Now the license over here says 180 days, but it's alright. Only after 180 days you're going to get a warning message. As such, you're not going to deactivate the license after 180 days, so that is not going to be an issue. Next, we want to download the ISO file, so click on ISO, click on continue. Now you have to give your details over here. It necessarily doesn't have to be the true details, so I'm just going to give up some fake details. Right, I don't want to subscribe to this, but you are free to. Continue. Please select your language, so let's go with English and click on download to download the ISO file. Now pause the video if you want to, because the ISO file is huge in size, so it might take a while to download. Since I have already downloaded, I will go ahead and show you how to get forward with the remaining steps. Alright, okay. So now we shall first open up our virtual machine environment. So in my case, I will be using VMware workstation 15. So we will create a new virtual machine. We'll click on installer disk image, and this is the file that is my ISO file. So VMware has directly detected that the ISO file corresponds to Windows Server 2019, so that's amazing. Next, we do not want to fill any product key version of Windows to install, so we will click on Windows Server Standard. We don't need to give any password confirm, so click on next. Yes. Here you can name your virtual machine. Since I already have a virtual machine with the name Windows Server 2019, I'm just going to use another name, Test Windows Server 2019. This is the browsing navigatory directory where I have to be installing my virtual machine, so I will just let it be on the same and click on next. Now we will allocate a maximum disk size for the virtual machine. Remember, we have given 60 GB over here, but it does not consume 60 GB. We will split the virtual disk into multiple files, and it hardly will use around 10 to maximum 15 to 20 GB. Alright, so click on split virtual disk into multiple files and click on next. Now uncheck power on this virtual machine after creation, because we want to be able to edit a few settings for the virtual machine before we power it on automatically. Alright, so once all this is done, we can click on finish, and you can see that my virtual machine is over here, Test Windows Server 2019. Okay, now we will click on edit virtual machine settings. So first things first, we will delete this floppy autoinst.flp, because then the VM is going to search for this file and we do not have the file, which is going to cause an issue in starting up the VM. So let's just as well remove it. Now memory, I'm going to leave it at 2 GB, or maybe, you know what, I'm just going to make it 4 GB. You can leave it at 2 GB, and it is just up to your configurations of the laptop. processors, hard disk, everything. I'm gonna NAT my network, so it is already NATed. um, okay, so that's perfect. Everything looks perfect. All right, so let's just go and click OK. Now when I start the virtual machine, it is going to ask me to click on a key really fast, so be extremely quick about it, because otherwise it is going to run into some kind of a grub menu and you're not going to be able to log in the normal way. All right, so we don't want to cause those issues. I have clicked here, and yes, we have clicked a key. All right, so we have powered on our Windows Server 2019. Now let's wait for the Windows Server 2019 to load. Okay, so it is asking for the language to install, time and currency format, keyboard or input method. We will just click on next by leaving these to defaults. Click on install now. Now it shall take some time to install the virtual machine. We will just wait for it. Perfect. Next, we are going to select on Windows Server 2019 Standard Evaluation Desktop Experience. So click on that and select next. Accept the license terms. Next. Here we will give custom install Windows only. So this we will choose to partition the drive space allocated. Since you've already seen here that it is saying drive 0 unallocated space, we will create a new partition and apply it. Click on OK. And you can see that the partitions have been made. So click on next. And now it is installing Windows. Alright, so this is going to take up some time. So we can wait for the Windows Server 2019 to get installed. Now once this is done, not for everyone the full screen mode is going to be enabled, so do not worry about that. We will take some steps to enable full screen as well. And then we are going to change the name of the PC to something more of a fancy environment. So for this entire series of videos, we are going to be emulating this entire Active Directory environment as something of a Marvel company, right? So I'm a Marvel fan. All right, so I'm going to be naming my Windows Server DC as something like Hydra DC. And this entire idea was inspired from my mentor Heath Adams. So a big shout out to Mr. Heath Adams. So this is going to take up some time. We will wait for it. After this happens, I am guessing it is going to ask for a restart of the entire VM. So let it happen as well. Do not stop the process or do not exit the VM in the process, because that will just enable us to screw up the settings. So we can click on restart now manually. Okay, so Windows is starting the services and it is getting the device ready. Alright, so now we have landed on this customize settings page and we will enter some passwords. So I'm entering a password that is familiar to me and you can do the same for your own passwords. And control alt delete to unlock. So in VM we have this button in virtual machine in VMware, sorry, we are going to click on this control alt delete button and this will send a command of control alt delete to the VM, and I will enter the password that I have just typed. So let's give it a moment to set up the environment. Perfect. So let's click on full screen. You will see that it is not full screening for me by default. So for some it might have and for some might not. So for the people who it hasn't, let's first enable full screen because it is just more easy to work with full screen mode. Okay, we can do remind me later. Okay, so click on player, we can go to manage and we can go to install VMware tools. Okay, and we can wait for the installation to happen. Now after the installation happens, we can click on this run setup64.exe. We can click on next, complete, click on next, install. I'm just going to close my Google Chrome. Okay, we can click on finish. You must restart your system for configuration, so we will restart it later. Now if you try the full screen mode, yippee, we have entered full screen mode. Perfect. Now as I said, we are going to first rename this PC. So let's rename this PC to just search and say view your PC name. Click on this, click on rename this PC. Now this is going to be a Marvel kind of a theme, right? So my domain controller needs to be something that is up to that kind of a benchmark. So I will name this Hydra DC. You can name it whatever. Next. And we will restart now. Continue. So this will rename our PC to that random set of characters to Hydra DC. Alright, so if you remember from the previous session, a domain controller is just a server that hosts the ADDS server. So I have named it Hydra DC to indicate that it's a domain controller. Okay. Now you will notice that every time your Windows server is started, this server manager is popped up. So server manager is our key environment. Okay, so we are going to work with server manager a lot, but let's configure a few things before we start to do that. All right, so click on manage, click on add roles and features. Next, role based or feature based installation, that's perfectly all right. Click on next, and here again click on next. All right, so here you remember we have spoken about Active Directory domain services in the previous session. So this is where we will install that service onto this domain controller. So we will click on add features, and then since it is enabled, now we can go and click next. Click on next, next, and install. So this installation is going to take some time. So we will just wait for the installation of ADDS onto the domain controller. Okay. So in the previous session, we had also mentioned that the ADDS service needs to be promoted to domain controller. So once the service is installed, we will look into how to promote this to domain controller. All right. So we have what is this configuration required installation succeeded on Hydra DC. Okay, perfect. So we can click on close. Now if you see, there is a alert over here, a flag kind of thing has raised, and it says promote this server to domain controller. Configuration required for Active Directory domain service at Hydra DC. So let's go ahead and promote this ADDS to a domain controller. Okay. So here we will go and add a new forest. Remember from the previous session that forest is nothing but a group of trees of domains that have been interconnected. All right. So we will go there, and in the root domain name we will give something to the effect of marvel.local. Next. Then we can keep this on the same password. All right, so we will give some password over here. Since it is loading, I was not able to click this box, so let's add a password. We can click on next. Again, we can click on next. So here the name of your domain should appear. So usually a domain name as shown in the previous session, how it is contoso.com or something.com. Here we are setting up an Active Directory environment in our local machine. So we have given it the name of marvel.local in order for us to able to emulate an entire Active Directory setup. So we can give next. So verify the NetBIOS name. Okay, now this is where I had told in the previous session that ntds.did file is there. So these are the, by default it is stored in this folder. So we will not touch that because it is what we want to use for the further attacks, right? So we will keep that at our default location and click on next. Again, next. Here if it is writing, if you click install, the server automatically reboots at the end of the promotion operation. So that is okay with us, right? So we are going to go ahead and install it. So let us give it a minute for verifying the prerequisites for domain controller operation. Yes, so all prerequisites checks are passed successfully. Now we can click on begin install to begin the installation. So let's do that. So we will wait until the installation is completed. We can see that installation is in progress. So these components are being installed, waiting for DNS, waiting for group policy management console. So we will wait until all of the required components are installed. Alright, you are about to be signed out. The computer is being restarted because ADDS was installed or removed. So we will definitely expect that, right? It was already given. So close, and we have been restarted. So we will wait for it to restart. So the laptop configurations that I am running this on is 16 GB RAM and a TB of SSD. So if the configurations are a little low, then there are other ways to set up your Active Directory environment. There are ways to set up your Active Directory environment using AWS or Azure or any of those cloud service providers. So a simple Google search could help you with that. This video sessions, we will be assuming that we are setting it up on our local machine. Okay, so once the computer settings are applied and our machine is rebooted, we will be logging in as the administrator into the marvel.local domain. Alright, so that will be the indication for us that our domain controller has been configured properly. So in the next sessions, we will be setting up two user machines and we will be domain joining them. So we will look at installing and everything up till domain joining those user machines in the next session. So let's wait for this computer settings to get applied. All right, so we can see that we have to press alt control delete. So we will give this key, and now you can see that it will ask you as marvel administrator, right? So marvel/administrator is coming. Before it was only administrator, right? So now you can see that you have logged in into the domain of marvel.local using the administrator user. All right, so we will give it the password as said before, and perfect. So we have installed our domain controller successfully, and in the next session let's start up our user machines and domain join them to this marvel.local domain. All right, until then, thank you.